They thought it was just another luxury car stop, but they had no idea the driver held the highest power in the FBI. What happened next left everyone frozen. Elijah Morgan was driving his sleek black Aston Martin through downtown streets, the sun reflecting off the polished surface of his car. He had just left an early morning briefing and was heading to a critical investigation when he noticed flashing lights in his rearview mirror. Officer Benson pulled him over immediately, striding toward the car with a smirk, assuming this black man in a luxury vehicle must be up to no good. Officer Harper followed, arms crossed, exchanging glances with his partner as they prepared to lecture and intimidate Elijah. Passers-by stopped, some peeking curiously, others whispering assumptions about the stolen car, unaware of who was sitting behind the wheel. Benson leaned toward the window, his voice sharp, asking for papers and questioning the ownership, his arrogance oozing through every word. Elijah remained calm, his hands steady on the wheel, his eyes fixed on Benson, measuring every move. The officer's tone grew increasingly condescending, mocking, and full of bias as they assumed guilt without reason. Pedestrians murmured, some filming on their phones, all feeding into the tension of the moment. Elijah finally spoke, his voice calm but commanding, stating his name and position, expecting to be dismissed or disbelieved. Benson's smirk faltered slightly, but he hid it, refusing to acknowledge the authority of a black man before him. Elijah's calm demeanor and precise words were met with disbelief, frustration, and escalating arrogance from the officers. Each second felt like a battle of wills, with bystanders holding their breath as the situation teetered between humiliation, potential escalation, and the revelation that would shock everyone. The tension was thick, the racial undertones undeniable, and Elijah knew one call could turn the moment completely around. This was more than a traffic stop. It was a confrontation that exposed bias, assumptions, and the dangerous consequences of racial profiling. If you want to see how Elijah turned this moment of injustice into complete control and shocked the cops, make sure to subscribe and follow for the full story, because Chapter 2 will reveal exactly how everything flipped. Elijah took a deep breath, letting his presence fill the car as Benson leaned closer, his smirk still in place, but now mixed with irritation. "License and registration," Benson barked, waving his hand impatiently. Elijah slowly reached for his wallet, opening it with the precision of a man who had faced danger far greater than a biased traffic stop, revealing his identification and FBI credentials in one fluid motion. Benson squinted at the ID, his smug expression faltering slightly, while Harper shifted uneasily beside him, glancing at his partner for guidance. Pedestrians stopped mid-step, their whispers growing louder, some pulling out their phones, sensing tension that went beyond a routine stop. Elijah spoke calmly, his voice deep and measured. "Officers, I am the FBI director assigned to this district. This car is registered to me. I suggest you verify before making assumptions." Benson's face turned red, pride clashing with disbelief, as he fumbled for his radio, muttering something about confirming the information. Harper stared silently, clearly unsure how to react, his posture rigid as he tried to maintain authority he no longer felt. The bystanders watched intently, the city street now charged with an energy that was equal parts fear, curiosity, and anticipation. Elijah's calm, unflinching demeanor forced a shift in the moment. His confidence was a silent command that Benson could not ignore. A tense silence fell, broken only by the crackle of the officers' radios, as Benson barked instructions that sounded hollow in comparison to Elijah's poised authority. The crowd murmured, some impressed, others shocked, as it became clear that these men had underestimated a black man, assuming that wealth and intelligence could not coexist in someone like him. Elijah leaned slightly forward, his eyes locking on Benson, silently asserting that he was in control, that every word and action from this point would be carefully observed, remembered, and recorded. By now, several pedestrians were openly recording the scene, capturing every shift in power, every moment of the officers' growing discomfort. What had started as a routine stop had transformed into a public lesson about arrogance, bias, and the consequences of underestimating someone based on race. Elijah's composure was unshakable, and it was clear that the officer's authority was now being silently challenged by a man whose position, power, and intelligence far exceeded theirs. One call, one verification, would not only restore order but flip the entire situation, humbling the officers and teaching everyone watching a lesson about judgment, respect, and accountability. The tension built, the city paused, and the moment teetered on the edge of humiliation, revelation, and justice. Stay tuned for Chapter 3 to see exactly how Elijah ensured that the arrogant officers learned a lesson they would never forget, because the full story is far more shocking than anyone on that street could have imagined, and it begins with a single, decisive action that changes everything. Comment below and subscribe to see how this injustice turned into one of the most satisfying lessons in accountability. Benson finally pressed the radio button, his fingers trembling slightly as he muttered the car's registration details, trying to maintain an illusion of control while the crowd stared in growing anticipation. Harper avoided eye contact with anyone, shifting nervously, aware that every pedestrian's gaze was now judging them as much as the law allowed. Elijah watched silently, his expression calm but unyielding, knowing that the arrogance of these officers would crumble when faced with proof of authority and intelligence combined. Moments passed like hours, the tension thickening in the chilly night air as the dispatcher confirmed the information. Benson's face drained of color, his lips quivering as he repeated the registration aloud, attempting to reconcile his prejudices with the undeniable fact in front of him. Harper glanced at him, clearly shocked, while bystanders whispered and recorded on their phones, the irony of the situation sinking in. These men, who had assumed criminality based solely on skin color and possession of a luxury car, were now exposed publicly. Elijah stepped out of the vehicle gracefully, his movements deliberate and commanding, drawing attention without a single word, radiating authority that made even Benson hesitate. "Officers," Elijah said, his voice firm but calm, echoing across the street, "you have humiliated yourselves and misused your authority tonight. Consider this a formal lesson in accountability and judgment." The words struck like thunder, leaving a stunned silence in their wake. Passengers waiting for buses and pedestrians who had been passing by stopped entirely, witnessing the unraveling of arrogance in real time, capturing a lesson about bias and the consequences of underestimating intelligence and authority. Benson tried to stammer an apology, but it came out hollow and insincere, while Harper simply nodded, unable to speak under the weight of realization. Elijah's measured steps toward the officers, his unwavering gaze, reminded everyone present that authority must be earned and respect cannot be assumed. Cameras, whispers, and the hum of astonishment filled the air as Elijah asserted control, turning what could have been a routine street stop into a public lesson that would be remembered long after the officers left. Every bystander, from the curious teenagers to the older pedestrians, recognized that this was more than a confrontation. It was an exposure of deep-seated bias, a moment of justice in the open, and a striking demonstration of intelligence and authority over prejudice and arrogance. By the time Elijah re-entered his vehicle, Benson and Harper stood frozen, their reputations subtly shattered in front of everyone, a moment that would be replayed in their minds and on social media as a cautionary tale. The city street had changed, if only slightly, reminding all who witnessed it that accountability is unavoidable when power and prejudice collide with true authority. Comment below and subscribe to see how the final chapter brings a complete, satisfying conclusion and the ultimate lesson learned. By the time Elijah re-entered his vehicle, Benson and Harper stood frozen, their reputations subtly shattered in front of everyone, a moment that would be replayed in their minds and on social media as a cautionary tale. But Elijah was not done. He calmly stepped out again, signaling the officers to approach, his gaze unyielding, his every movement radiating authority that could not be challenged. "Officer Benson, Officer Harper," he began, his voice calm but commanding, "your assumptions tonight were reckless, your biases on full display, and your abuse of authority unacceptable. This is not just a lesson for you, but for anyone who believes prejudice can shield them from accountability." Benson's lips trembled, Harper swallowed hard, both realizing that the arrogance that had fueled them for years had just been dismantled in a single public encounter. Bystanders whispered among themselves, recording every second, some shaking their heads, some nodding in approval, all witnessing a moment of justice unfold in real time. Elijah gestured toward his car, the symbol of status and authority that had been misjudged, and said, "Judgment without knowledge is dangerous, and power without integrity is meaningless. Consider this an opportunity to reflect, learn, and correct your behavior before it causes irreparable damage." The officers stood silently, speechless, the weight of their actions crashing down, realizing that assumptions rooted in racism could never withstand truth and competence. Pedestrians, from teenagers to elderly neighbors, understood that justice need not be loud or vengeful. It could be calm, precise, and devastatingly effective. Social media feeds would later capture this scene in its entirety, highlighting the moment a man's composure and authority outshone prejudice, sending ripples across the community. Elijah returned to his vehicle one last time, offering a slight nod to the witnesses and pedestrians, a gesture that communicated both power and restraint, the ultimate combination that left an impression far stronger than anger or retaliation ever could. Benson and Harper, humbled and exposed, had no choice but to face consequences within their department, learning that arrogance, racism, and unchecked authority carry inevitable repercussions. The lesson extended far beyond the street. It was a reminder to every onlooker that integrity, calm, and intelligence command respect more than intimidation or prejudice ever will. As Elijah drove away, the crowd erupted into whispers of admiration, recognizing the rare sight of true authority exercised with poise and precision. Every bystander knew they had witnessed a moment that would stay with them, teaching that fairness and accountability are not optional but essential. Comment below if you were inspired by Elijah's calm authority, and subscribe to see more stories that expose injustice, deliver suspense, and show real lessons in courage and respect. Remember, prejudice can be challenged, arrogance confronted, and integrity always prevails when wielded wisely.